Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Vince, and today joining me is Keisha. We're going to have a conversation about autism and what it's like being the parent of a child with autism. Now, I have somebody here who has a lot of things in their resume. Educator, administrative educator,
yes.
Author.
Yes.
But the most important thing is that she is the parent, the mother of the little professor. And so we're going to get into it and talk about autism today and what that's like for her family, for the child's siblings, and what resources are available, and all of those things while we make ourselves a nice lunch.
Yes.
A little garlic shrimp.
Yes.
Spanish rice.
Yes.
Sangria for me.
Yeah, for me.
And some garlic toast. So let's get into it. All right, so we're gonna get started on our lunch. So we have some clean and deveined shrimp, some garlic, of course, salt, pepper, red pepper flakes, smoked paprika. If you want it a little hotter, you could probably use like hot smoked paprika, which is very good. Some garnish, our parsley, chopped onions. I think that's everything, so that's it. So we're gonna need to kind of fine chop some parsley. So we're gonna throw that in there when we season our olive oil, and I will begin chopping our onions. So let me ask you first of all, what is autism?
It's a neurological, thank you, that's the word I'm looking for. It's a neurological disorder that affects how people process emotionally, physically, as well as intellectually. So.
And are there different versions of it?
Well,
you mean
the autism spectrum disorder has actually 3 levels. Okay. So level 1, level 2, level 3. A level 1 would be a person who needed minimal support. Level 2, moderate support, and of course level 3 would be severe. Would need lots of support.
So is autism different for children and adults? So if you have it when you're young, goes away when you get older, or can people be diagnosed as adults, or like?
Actually, autism is a disorder that you keep for your entire life. It is a lifetime. And so it just depends on when you're diagnosed that you actually begin to live with the actual disorder. However, most children are diagnosed anywhere between the ages of 1 and 3, but we find now that more and more of the population are not being diagnosed until after the age of 4. So that's really why it's such a concern, because early intervention is so important to actually helping children with autism manage and parents manage the disorder.
And so at 4, they're getting ready to go to kindergarten and all pre-K and daycare. Kind of puts them at a disadvantage?
No, I wouldn't say a disadvantage. It would put them it would be challenging, right? And depending on what level they're diagnosed at will determine the level of challenge that they have. And so my daughter, for instance, is 4, and she is in a general education pre-K classroom, right? Even though she has an autism spectrum disorder diagnosis. Whereas we do have classes at my particular school that actually have what we call special needs pre-K and kindergarten, and those particular classrooms deal with students that are probably more so on level 2 and 3.
So how does she interact with her classmates?
There are times, for the most part, she's very social. I like to consider her atypical. She's not what most people think of when they think of autistic children, being very standoffish or not being able to socialize effectively. She is very social, sometimes to a flaw, okay? So she is also an empath, so she takes on the emotions of the people around her. So if you were to start crying, she 9 times out of 10 would start crying too, because she internalizes your emotion. So like last night, she watched a episode and it was a birthday party and somebody blew out the candles before time and the little girl started to cry, and so she started to cry. So it took us a minute to kind of get her to a point where she could calm down, because she was associating with the emotions of the person on the film.
For parents, is there are there symptoms or signs, or are there things like what made you even consider that? Oh, my daughter might have autism.
Well, one, I'm an educator, so I see a lot.
I'm educated.
Not educator, educator.
Okay.
So
Educator.
I see a lot of students that come through the school system who have autism.
Okay.
Two, I noticed that there were some things, she's my second child. My oldest child is 27. And so she's the younger version, but I'm much more in tune now as an older mom. And so what I found was she could tend to herself for long periods of time without adult or anyone intervening. So she could sit and watch her show, or she could sit and play with one toy for hours. And that just seemed so odd. Then I remember my mom asking if she was mimicking, right? So if I said boo, 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 she would just look at me like, what are you doing? And so she wouldn't come back with that same behavior. So those were some of the signs. Fleeting eyes, sometimes you'll hear that, where she wasn't giving me really direct eye contact a lot of the times. And then again, really her mild mannerisms was my real indicator. And most people would miss that, right? Because I was thinking, thank you, Jesus. He gave me a baby that can sit and I can get dressed and she not cry. And that was a sign. I didn't realize it.
Was that very, very different than your first child?
Yes.
Okay.
He needed all of our attention. He, after 2 or 3 minutes, it was like on to the next thing. Whereas she would just kind of get just mesmerized by whatever it was. Maybe it was her fingers. Maybe it was her pacifier. It didn't take much to keep her attended to. So that was a concern for me. A lot of friends told me, girl, just let her be a 2-year-old. Let her be a 1-year-old. She's a baby. And I thought, and as a mother, you just have that innate feel like something is different, right? There's something different here. And so by the time we got to 15 months, and we were at our milestone checklist, and this is where a lot of parents miss it, because on the milestones where you go to the pediatrician and they say, can your child do this? Yes. Can your child do that? So they were asking me like, does your child have a vocabulary of 20 more words? And I'm thinking, yeah, she sings every nursery rhyme known to man, right? Without the words. I'm thinking all those words are words, right? Well, in actuality, they weren't. It was rote. It was just that repeated behavior, which is also another sign.
For the parents who don't have access to all those resources, so some parents don't take their kid for the 15-month pediatrician checklist, how would they be aware to even consider something like that? You know what I mean?
And the big part is most people don't want to consider. That's the first thing.
Okay.
But they can, if they're not going to their pediatrician. There are lots of organizations, Autism Speaks. There's lots of Facebook groups that are out there that provide support and resources to parents as well. Instagram, Holly Pete Robinson, she's huge. Her kid, she's been advocating for her son for years. And so she is always flooding social media with resources and information. But just really the most important part is to make sure that you're taking your kids to their normal pediatrician visits, right? And making sure that you are actually looking at that milestone checklist. And they can pull the milestones. You can pull the milestones up online. Even if you don't go to the doctor, you can go in and say, hey, what should my 1-year-old be doing right now? Right? And then being honest with the checklist. That's another thing, right? If they do it one time, that doesn't consider that they can do it, right? It has to be something that they do repeatedly or over time. So that's somewhere else.
I think everything is prepped. I need a little more parsley.
Okay.
We're gonna heat up our skillet, and we are getting ready to get these shrimp in some oil. We're gonna pour enough oil in to cover the bottom of the pan. So while we're waiting on this to warm up, how do you stay not overwhelmed?
Whoever said I wasn't overwhelmed? No, there are moments of overwhelming where you feel overwhelmed. But honestly, having a supportive family, my husband, my older children are there to assist us, and then creating that village of support has been It's smoking.
Keep going.
A village of support has been very, very important. I think that most people, that's gonna be
3 spoons, yeah.
3 spoons, all right.
It's
But
garlic,
I
so we do a
find
lot.
that what most people fail to do is share the diagnosis of their child, right? And I like garlic, okay? So
To your heart's desire.
Let's put it all in
It's
there.
garlic shrimp, right? Put some on there.
Okay, here we go.
Oh.
It's all in there. All right,
Hallelujah.
there we go. So just
Spread
really
this out.
creating a village of support for yourself.
Okay.
When we first got the professor's diagnosis, we actually held a Zoom call. It was during the pandemic, and we held a Zoom call to invite all of our family members in our village to hear about what we were getting ready to embark upon.
Oh yeah, that smells
Fragrant.
good. Nice and fragrant.
Nice
Yes,
and fragrant.
yes.
Look,
yes.
I was practicing on my chef terminology.
Shoving it up.
Okay, so that was an amazing piece for us because our family was a part of from the very beginning. They have an opportunity to ask questions.
That's good. Give it a stir in.
And they had an opportunity to ask questions. Some didn't agree with us. Some didn't believe us. You know, there's nothing wrong with that, baby.
When you say they didn't agree, people, do you think that's cultural?
Yes, I do believe it is.
Pepper flakes. I remember growing up. I think when I grew up in the era I grew up with, if it was now, all of the kids that I grew up with would have been diagnosed with ADHD or something because everybody ran around. But society was very different. It was go outside and play versus nobody really focused on the kid and what they're.
But do you remember that kid that didn't get to come outside and play? They stood in the window. I know I had a little boy across the street from me when I was growing up, and he never came outside, but they had a picture window, and he would just stand in the window, right?
Okay.
And so we're going paprika now.
Paprika.
So he would just stand in the window, and his cousins and his brothers would be outside playing with us, and he would be in the house. And when I thought about that when she was diagnosed, and I thought, you know what? That baby didn't get to come outside because the parents, number one, didn't want anybody to know that that child was different. And two, it required the parents to be involved, right? And so right now, our parents are not as involved as they should be when it comes down to our children with disabilities. We think for some reason that this is something that the child can be disciplined out of, okay? Autism is not something you can spank away. Like I told you earlier, it's for you for life. And so you can't discipline it away. You can't wish it away. You can't just say, oh, punish it away. It doesn't work. And so most families are not willing to take on that responsibility of truly understanding what it takes to interact with a child on the spectrum.
Well, maybe their only frame of reference for parenting is what they grew up with, and that's all they know to refer to. So when they hear something else, sometimes people think we don't deal with that.
True. You know, it's...
But I'm not saying that we shouldn't, but I think we should inform ourselves, find out about it, and really get to know what should or shouldn't be done.
You know, we're more likely, specifically I feel in our community, in the African American community, we're more likely to accept a diagnosis of attention deficit disorder or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder than we are to accept a diagnosis of autism.
Why is that?
I think because autism doesn't look the same. It's not one of those acceptable behaviors. When my daughter is having a meltdown, it can last from 2 minutes to 20 minutes, right? There's no, you can't just say, close your mouth, be quiet. That doesn't work, right? But it's okay to say, oh, little Johnny is a little hyper, or he likes to jump, or just let him go outside and burn off that energy. But you don't get to burn off autism, right? And so when those mental meltdowns and those physical meltdowns occur, we find that most parents are not comfortable because they don't really have a game plan for addressing the behavior.
How do you prepare for autism, a diagnosis of autism? Or do you get prepared once you get the diagnosis?
The diagnosis is your preparation, because that is the time where you start to say to yourself, look, I need to know more, right? Something is different here. But the thing about it too that's often misconstrued is that I can't call you and say, hey, you know, little Johnny is doing this, and you say, oh yeah, my child's doing the same thing, and handle it the same way. I can only share with you what I've done with my daughter, and then you'll determine whether or not that fits the bill at your house, right? Because it's a spectrum, there can be two children at level 1 that operate completely different, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the thing. And I may be level 1 today and level 2 tomorrow, depending on the situation that I'm in.
Oh, so the level 1, 2, and 3 can change based on the situation?
That's why it's called a spectrum, right? Because you can slide. In most cases, if you're, if you probably will never, if a child is level 1, the prayer is that they'll never be level 3. Level 3 is nonverbal. You have a child who's having some physical disability that goes along with that neurological disorder. Whereas my daughter may be able to socialize in pre-K, but find it very difficult in kindergarten. And her behavior may elevate to a level 2 where she needs more support than she did when she was only 4.
I'm going to ask a silly question, and I already know the answer. Is there a cure for autism? The answer is no. So 20 years from now, when she's 24, 25, what is life like for her then?
It varies. It varies. This is why early intervention is so important. Because the earlier you intervene, you change the trajectory of the disorder. So the sooner I teach her how to deal with her emotional meltdowns or her sensory issues, right? The longer she has the opportunity to practice and to be more in tune with how to regulate her own body, right?
Okay.
But if I don't see it or she's not diagnosed until she's 12, then we've already cut off 12 years of her practice, right? So you think about it like riding a bike or skating. The more you do it, right, the better you become at it, right? And so you don't remember all the falls in the beginning because you've now learned how to hold yourself up, or you've learned how to balance. Same thing with autism.
I've seen the little professor up close and personal, and I know one day I'm watching and I'm looking, but I looked at you and your husband, and I realized that this is like you guys are each other's support system. Excuse me, but you guys see things very differently.
We do.
And so, how do you guys manage to co-parent and support each other, knowing you see, I know it's the same as me and my wife with our children growing up, growing up in different families, you have a different approach.
Right.
But with this, the child is the focus and you do what's best for the child. How'd you guys manage to narrow down what was the best way? Oh wait, that look in your face says you're still working on that?
No, actually, I was thinking in the very beginning, it was difficult.
We're gonna do these in batches.
Okay.
And the next round, the tongues are all yours.
Yeah.
And so we're gonna cook them just a little bit under, so they'll keep warming through.
Juicy.
And stay juicy, and we don't want rubber shrimp.
No.
So yeah. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
So in the very beginning, it was very difficult for him to accept the diagnosis. He was very much against what I was proposing or what the doctor had suggested, based on the fact that he decided as his perfect little girl and that she was just a baby, and what was I expecting from her? And my expectations were way too high. And so it took us a minute to get to a point of co-parenting successfully.
Okay.
We had our diagnosis, we had our meeting with the psychologist that confirmed her diagnosis. And so at the end of that confirmation, you have a meeting with the psychologist where she explains to you the findings from the psychological review. And so we're all on the Zoom call together, and he's listening. He's very quiet. And then he says, so the lady's like, oh, she can do this, she can do that. She might not be able to do this.
A couple minutes, then flip.
Okay. She might not be able to do this or that. And so he just breaks out and asks, what makes my child autistic? Because she's brilliant, and she explained to him that every child was different, but that our child was autistic, not so much about what she couldn't do, but all the things that she could do. So he said, wait, so she's like a genius? And so she said, we would have to determine that later on. But as of right now, she is extremely what they like to call high functioning, meaning that she could count by tens, by twos. This is at the age of 2. She could read basic sight words. she could memorize. That's what she liked to sing, right? So she could sing a whole album of nursery rhymes from the time we left work to home, which is about an hour, without repeating a song. And so that type of memory was something that was attributed to her ASD diagnosis. So I think it was at that moment that he realized it was comfortable for him that his daughter was autistic or had autism based on the fact that she was brilliant, right? And so once he realized that, he was more in tune with, okay, now what do we do next? And so we realized that behavior became our next challenge, crying, tantrums, and then how to handle those. And we realized that we handled them differently. He had a connection with her. He had a connection with her that I didn't have. There were days he came home, I was on the couch crying, and he was looking at me like, don't worry about it, I got it. I said, okay, thank you, Jesus, because I was about to tap out, okay? So, and once we did that, I think we began to really, research and understand collectively together how we could support each other. So when he's parenting, I don't intervene.
Okay.
Because dads do it different.
Absolutely.
And moms want to control everything, and I'm a control mom. But I had to learn how to let him do her, because we had to realize if anything happened to either one of us, we both had to be able to deal. And so that was easier for us. So that's how we are now. So you'll see us, I'll back off like, okay, daddy got it. And I don't even intervene. And then she'll come. Now she's learned. She's like every other 4-year-old. Mommy, can I have a yogurt? I
she
say
figured
no.
out how to manipulate
and then she'll
each
go,
one separately.
Daddy, can I have a yogurt? And it's like, now he's like, well, what did your mama say? So that's just like every other neurotypical
Would he
household.
say yes before?
Yes.
Okay.
Anything she wanted, as long as she's not crying. No, we cannot feed this behavior. We're not going to feed it, because you know that about 16%, no, probably a little bit bigger than that, about 21% of children with ASD are also obese, because we feed the behavior.
So let's talk about that. So how does food play a part in autism, especially young to old? How's it like? Do you have to have a restricted diet, special diet, or is it just like everybody else? And they are just like everybody else. Like, so how does that play a role in their well-being?
It just really depends. My child has what I like to call food. She likes what she likes.
Okay.
I wouldn't say a food aversion, because there are some children that are autistic who actually will not eat at all, or do not know, they do not have the neurological disposition to actually eat, to like make the mouth move and chew food. So some of them you will find their feeding tubes. So some of them have some real gastrointestinal issues because of the ASD. She's just very particular about what she eats. I don't know if that's because of the diet we gave her when she was little. We was kind of very bland. We were very natural. I made her baby food. I milled her own oatmeal, those type of things, because I've struggled with weight my entire life. I just refuse to allow my child to do the same thing. Okay. So I didn't want to predisposition those fat cells early. So I wanted to make sure she had a more wholesome, palate. Yeah. But actually, it just stayed the same. She just likes oatmeal, and she likes pancakes. Are we ready to take them out?
Yeah, not that one. Yeah, flip that one.
That one might be good?
Yeah, so we can take the rest of these, leave that one there, and
okay.
We're going to go to the next batch.
All right.
And then we'll be almost
so,
done.
but yeah, so she's like, she has what she likes, and every day we expose her to different tastes, and sometimes she's willing, and sometimes she's like, no, thank you. And we just kind of go with that. We choose our battles.
Are there nutritionists involved, or just you guys trying to figure out, okay, she's going to be okay with this, she can eat this, I know she'll eat this, I'm not going to waste my money on this?
So I'm constantly researching different things with children on the spectrum. I found a product called Enough, and it is actually granulated vegetables. It's about 12 different vegetables in a sprinkle. I find that people are using that.
You can take those out.
You can take those out. They're using it like when they go camping and you don't, want to take produce with you. They would just take that product and sprinkle it in their food.
Granulated vegetables. It sounds
granulated
like the Matrix when you put the little mush.
So, but you know what? But it doesn't have a taste. As parents, we taste it first, right? So I put it in my milk. I put it in my food, and you can't taste it. And so we've become creative as well. So we use that, but we also become creative in our preparation. So my pancakes have spinach chopped up in it. My spaghetti has a can of string beans chopped up in it. So, here's the thing. You'll learn with ASD, you learn how to pick your battles. And what is the ultimate goal? The ultimate goal is to get the nutrition inside the child. Yeah. No one said it had to go in its regular form. So we are very creative in how we get those fruits and veggies. We use a lot of V8, right? Okay. 2 vegetables, 2 fruits in each serving of the juice. So it's just different.
Okay. And so we'll continue our conversation. So we'll start with, I don't want to say healthcare in the Black community, but just autism and things like that, or diseases or issues. Is autism a disease? Should I say that?
It's a disorder.
Disorders that kind of come with a stigma. How does the Black community reconcile all of that and not be stuck with, oh, my child is not this or that, I don't want to look at my child this way, and so on? How do we, what's the best way for us to move forward away from that?
I think that what I find in my time in education is that the African American community is very, very reticent to the concept or the understanding of autism. And so lots of people in the African American community feel like it's just one more diagnosis that they give to our children, and that's not the case. In most cases, minority children are underdiagnosed or not diagnosed until they have become school age, okay? And so because of that, yummy, Brett, love it. Because of that, most of our kids become frustrated with the education system simply because they're not prepared. Parents become frustrated with the education system simply because they're not prepared.
The parents are not prepared, or the school is not prepared?
The parents are not prepared for what this looks like in an educational setting, right? See, autism at home is one thing, but when you put your child in a classroom with other neurotypical children, right, who don't have that neurological disorder, your child begins to stand out. Okay? And so most people don't like that. I don't want my child.
So what happens when your child is not diagnosed with autism, but they do have it, and they end up with just in the general classes? Are the teachers prepared? That's what I mean. The teachers may get a student who they think, you should be able to handle this. What's wrong with little Johnny? Why is he not performing? Why is he not doing right? The teacher doesn't know he has autism.
Right.
The parents don't know because they haven't considered. So now little Johnny is the one that's suffering.
Absolutely.
What do both parties do?
We see that on a daily basis. Actually, 1 in 44 children right now in the United States, based on the CDC's 2018 research, 1 in 44 children are diagnosed with autism, right? 1 in about 27 of them are boys. Okay. 1 in 116 are girls.
So you're saying more boys end up with autism?
Absolutely. So when you think about the minority, the disparity, so what do you immediately think? Oh, our Black boys are the ones being diagnosed with autism, right? And so, like I said, parents are more likely to accept ADHD, ADD, right? They'll even accept EBD. Let me stop using these acronyms because I'm an educator and I realize that. So emotional behavior disorder, right? Our kids have a hard time socializing, right? Have a hard time dealing with their emotions. So we're okay with that EBD. The attention deficit disorder, oh, he just doesn't pay attention. His daddy didn't pay attention. We kind of make concessions for the behavior, right? But that's behavior that in our community, we have been able to discipline away. Right? Mm-hmm. So when a child is in a general education classroom, in a general education classroom, and they haven't been diagnosed, you put your child at a disparity and the teacher. Our teachers are really struggling in the classrooms now because they don't have the strategies that they need in order to actually assist those students academically. Okay?
As an educator, does the school system equip you with do they equip the teachers with just looking out for these types of things? ADHD, autism, behavior disorders.
We have a general guideline of things that are what we like to call red flags. And so when those red flags pop up, teachers immediately go to what we call the response to intervention timeline, right? So we start saying, something's different, right? But the thing about that is that we have to get the parent on board in order to go through the testing process, right? But if mom or dad is in denial, then that stops immediately and the child suffers, right?
Does economics play a role in it? Like if you're a single parent household and the mom is like, I got to go to one of my 3 jobs. I don't have time to be going to school for little Johnny. He needs to sit his butt down, get his mind right, and I got no time for this.
Absolutely.
Does economics play a role?
I think it does. I also see a lot of times where parents will say, you know what, I'll just keep them at home with me. And the pandemic has kind of served us in that parents feel like that's an alternative now. So now they're not even sending them to school. So now, even if we were trying to test or to evaluate this child to give them some assistance or support, because the child is not readily coming to school, right, because of the behavior, and it's not always behavior. Right? It can just be, again, that processing disorder, right? So for instance, my daughter, she has a keen memory. She memorizes things very clearly, very quickly. It's either auditory or visual for her. There are other children who don't have that ability to remember. So they may learn something today, but tomorrow they forget. So that makes things like toileting a challenge, right? That makes things like eating, walking, running, skipping. So again, that spectrum can slide at any given moment in time. So oftentimes children on the spectrum actually have some regression at times. Like you teach them something and they come back. So you're going to hear about therapies like ABA, the applied behavior analysis. A lot of parents use that as a more intensive training for children that are on the spectrum. My daughter did not have ABA, but she did have early intervention through Babies Can't Wait, which is a great program in Georgia that helps parents from the age of birth to 3 years old. So she got a lot of therapy through the Babies Can't Wait program that other children don't get. And so when your child is diagnosed with autism, that range of intervention is from 18 months to 36 months. That's a really small window, right? Yeah. But that time frame, right, can change the child's trajectory. When you talked about adulthood, right? Mm-hmm. Being able to do for yourself, right? This is delicious, by the way. I'm so good at talking.
Yes, thank you.
Awesome.
Oh, are you enjoying lunch?
Yes, absolutely. It's delicious.
I am enjoying lunch. I'm enjoying the conversation. I want to talk about something else. So I see you have a book here. Mm-hmm. And so you're an author?
I am.
How many books did you write?
This is my first one. I've written 2 so far.
I see one. Where's the next book?
The next book is due to come out by Valentine's Day.
Valentine's Day 2023.
It's in publication right now. Yes.
So this book is called The Little Professor Meets Rainbow. Mm-hmm. What's it all about? I read it. I'm just asking. What's it all about?
It talks about our journey as a family from birth to diagnosis. We talked about earlier about those warning signs, those things that you said, what made you think that there was something different? So in the book, we talk about the things that we actually saw in our daughter that made us say, that's a little different. Maybe we should talk to someone about it. Yeah. It also talks about how my husband began to, embrace the fact that we had a child on the spectrum. And so in this book, it is a story about a little girl who is going through the normal developmental process of her life and ultimately is given a gift from her psychologist. And that psychologist gives her the gift of rainbow. And the rainbow is representative of her autism, right? Of autism. And so the way we present it in the book is that we want communities, we want families to embrace autism as a gift and not as a curse. We see the world through my daughter's eyes now, and it is a whole new world for us. Having a 27-year-old, several children in our family that we've raised, but seeing the world how she sees it has broadened our understanding of what can be and what we thought was the only way. And so this book is to help parents and children embrace differences that they may see in their peers and in their family members and show them how to really understand what it's saying to them. And so Rainbow becomes a character. Rainbow is the little professor's best friend, right? Because every child with autism, they don't get to leave their rainbows at home. They are their forever friends. And so Rainbow, as you'll see throughout the book, from the very beginning, from birth, Rainbow was always in the room. But because parents are not looking for it, they don't see it. And so as you turn the page, if you go back through the book, and at the end we say, did you see Rainbow throughout the book? You'll see that as you get closer to diagnosis, that rainbow becomes brighter and brighter, where you have no choice but to embrace it and see it.
How do we as people of color learn to embrace like our child's, their normal? Like what their normal is may not be like everybody else. How do we embrace what our child's normal is and help them navigate through the world, knowing that their normal is not the same as everybody else's normal?
I think it's just about making sure that we're prioritizing the priority. Like we talked about the vegetables, right? The goal is every parent wants their child to be healthy, neurotypical or neurodiverse, right? How
What
do
does
we
that
go?
mean?
Neurodiverse, meaning that the brain operates neurodiversity.
I see the shirt.
Celebrate
That's why
the spectrum. Everybody's brain works differently, right? Okay. There are some people who are, we used to call it artsy fartsy, right? They like art, they do well with that. There are people that are musically inclined, right? There's a portion of the brain that addresses that. And it works harder in some people than it does in others, right? Yes. That's why some people can hold a note and some people can't, but that all goes to our brain function. And so when we say neurotypical, we're talking about the majority, right? And the doctor kind of explained it to me like this. She said, if your daughter were operating like 80% of the population, autism would be neurotypical. And everybody else would be neurodiverse, right? And so I understood it that way. It's like, okay, so when I realized that she's just thinking about things differently, we stopped and we just observed. But what I find in the African American community, we have to be present, right? A lot of what we learned about her, the pandemic was what it was. But it was such a blessing to my family because it gave me the time to be at home to just watch. And as she was developing, I was developing like, oh, she can do that. Oh, she knows that. Oh, how does she know that? And so we start realizing that there were things going on that we weren't even aware of. Yeah. She would see something and I would say like, oh, that's the city. She said, that's a really tall house. Right? And I was like, well, no, it's a sky, it's a building. She says, it's the city. We live in the country. Okay, well, you're 3. How do you know the difference between the city and the country? But she was associating what she had seen at some point, whether it was YouTube Kids or just in conversation with what she knew. And being able to put it in a complete sentence that it made sense, it's like, that's different. Most times our parents just want our kids to go away and be quiet. And when they can't go away and be quiet, it becomes an issue. And that's where behavior and discipline come in. And they think that this is something that I can spank you and say, be quiet. You can spank an autistic child, and guess what? They're not going to be quiet. It's actually going to escalate the behavior. And so we had to learn that when she was having a meltdown, there were certain things that we needed to do, whether it was applying pressure to her pressure points, whether it was giving her deep hugs, right? So that she could feel us next to her. It's a process, but it's just like parenting. It's parenting. There's no book.
Yeah.
You have no guide that tells you the absolute best way to do it. Everything is trial and error. But you got to try it to determine whether or not it works.
How does culture play a role in I know for me, my parents, my grandparents were great-grandparents, Jim Crow, right out of slavery, all that kind of stuff. So their parenting style was more to, you got to learn this so you can stay alive. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, it's different things to worry about. And so how do parents teach a child diagnosed with autism how to navigate what's happening in the world right now? Or will they even interact with it? Because you said she does YouTube Kids and all that.
She does. As far as technology is concerned, very astute. What I find is danger. So like you're talking about danger, those things like holding hands when you cross the street or looking both ways or, I used to wonder, will she ever be able to drive? Will she be able to attend? And so I've just found that repetitive instruction, right, is been our best thing. So now we have a lot of conversation. A lot of people would say, oh, you're doing too much talking. Well, that's how she learns. And so I had to tap into how she learned, not how I wanted her to learn or how I was teaching her. Because we teach, again, like you said, the way we were taught.
Yeah.
So I was teaching her. So now when we leave out of the building, in my school building every day, when we're getting ready to cross the parking lot, I actually have a conversation. Okay, we're getting ready to go outside now. What do we need to do? And she'll say, I need a hand, right? And I'll say, well, why do you need a hand? Because it's dangerous, right? You have to look both ways. This is her repetitive language, but it's reinforcing daily that this is an expectation. When you cross the street, you need someone's hand and you look both ways. This is going to eliminate my child darting out because she doesn't understand danger as we understand it, right? That if something hits you, it's going to hurt. She hasn't gotten that quite, but she now knows that before you cross the street, you need a hand. My hand, your hand, she just looking for someone's hand. And she'll say, I need a hand. Yeah. Right? And it doesn't matter who's talking to her. Yeah. So now we're working on stranger danger, okay? Because, hello, hi, how was your day today? This is us in a supermarket. So she hasn't learned that don't talk to strangers, but most children on the spectrum don't talk at all. So some parents don't have that concern. So you'll find that depending on where your child is on the spectrum, your concern may be different for safety, security, right? Danger. Some have that, some don't, right? So it's just like if you have a child that's nonverbal, for instance, that child can't speak. So that means he can't tell you when he's hurt. He can't tell you when he's sick. But I have a baby, although she's on the spectrum, can tell me, I'm sick. I need to go to the doctor, right? Because she's associating with something she's watched on YouTube Kids. And when you're sick, you go to the doctor, right?
Do you think some parents of autistic children are overprotective?
Yeah, it took me a long time to let her hand go. I think that she would be, I feel like sometimes I kind of stifled some of that development, like her running and jumping and those physical things, because I was so afraid when we went outside that she would run away and not come back, right? Or attending to her name. Most children on the spectrum, when you call their name, they don't respond because they're so focused and locked in on what they're doing, that part of the brain is not even in play. Right? So like we're talking right now and we can hear the lights and we can maybe hear, different things. She wouldn't even hear that. All she would hear was whatever she was focused on. So I held her hand so tightly because I thought she's going to run away and I'm going to call her name and she's not going to come back. And so we have to learn how.
What did it take for you to stop doing that?
I just realized if I don't never let her hand go, I'll never know what she's going to do, right? And so I had to let her hand go to see what was going to happen and be prepared to respond either way, right? The truth of the matter was, she surprised me because she didn't run and she didn't not answer, right? She wanted to play. And so that was so refreshing, right? Like going to the playground, like, what do you mean? Like, oh God, she might go up that thing and I can't get to her. Well, she fell down, and just like every other kid, I wiped her off, and then she went and played again. Okay. And so I think that's something else that we have to realize, that these are still children, right? Or adults or young adults, even though they have a disorder right now that kind of prohibits them from necessarily processing everything in the same way that we do. They're still children.
They're still children.
Yeah, they're still children.
What is Dad's opinion in all of this? Has he changed a little bit more? I mean, I spoke to him recently about all of this, and actually, what I saw was I saw a little professor. She was having a time at an event. She was running and ripping. But what I saw is that when people don't see this, they don't realize how much is involved. But I know he has his own approach to, like, this is how I have to deal with that. And I know I asked you before, like at this point now, is he different than he was in the beginning?
He is a lot different. A lot. We know more. We've experienced more, and we're willing to experience more with her. We're very proactive. So I'm not going to leave my house without some graham crackers, some fruit snacks in my purse. I'm probably going to have a yogurt. I'm going to have what she needs in order to be successful, right? And he's the same way, right? 2 car seats, one in my car, one in her car. You know, we create this environment that there's this duality between us, right? So not much of her routine is interrupted, no matter if she's with mom or she's with dad, right? And so we acknowledge what she likes. And we make sure that we have those things on hand. My mom does it, my sister, her siblings, everybody is in tune. And that's why the village is so important, because it can be your first question. How do you keep from being overwhelmed? The village is what keeps us from being overwhelmed. I have a mentee that I have had since 3rd grade. She is my daughter's babysitter. She has tapped into her. They have a bond. And I can now go out on a date with my husband and leave her with her sitter and feel confident that she is going to be in good hands. Okay? And so that builds over time. It's not something that happens immediately, but if you never give the village an opportunity to come in, we're so prideful as a people sometimes. We don't want people to see us at our low points, right? And nobody wants to you to come into their house and their child is running around with no clothes on, because there are times where we're at the stove cooking and she was right there, fully dressed, and then we'll turn around and she don't have on anything. Right?
Did you have to work through that pride? Like, this is what's going on with me?
Yeah, like, what is going on? But then again, the question you have to ask yourself is, what's wrong with being naked at home? Is it a bad thing? So this is what I say, when you start to think differently, like, is it a bad thing?
Depends on who's there.
Right, depends on who's there.
Oh, you're talking about kids, not adults.
No, I'm not talking about the adults, I'm talking about the kids. So, but here's the thing, but then, again, we go back to that conversation. So now, if you have a conversation with the professor and asked her, where can you take your clothes off? Just at home. Because I didn't want her to believe that this behavior was acceptable where? Everywhere. At school, right? She turn around, come out of the bathroom, she got her clothes on, it's a problem. But a lot of times, these are some of the nuances that we experience as parents of children with autism that most parents don't have to deal with. My daughter's gonna take her shoes and socks off in the grocery cart. So here's the question though. How important is keeping your shoes and socks on in the grocery cart? Because when you get to but think about it. But that's the thing. Seeing the world through her eyes. How important is it? She's in the cart.
Depends on the parent. Because some parents, the pride steps in. You can't act like I said, how I was raised. This is your behavior when you go out in public. You are not going to reflect negatively on my family.
Right.
But are you really I hear what you're saying.
So my question is really taking off my socks and shoes a negative reflection?
Yeah, you're going to get a beating for that. When I was growing up,
I put socks on 4 different times in Walmart, right?
I hear what you're saying.
But I never put on the shoes. I only put the socks on because it was cold, right? But I never forced the shoes, because when we get out the cart, I'm gonna put the shoes on and we're gonna walk. But right now, I don't need a meltdown in the middle of Walmart simply because you took your shoes off. Because there are times during the day, I wanna take my shoes off. I take my shoes off under my desk all the time. So when you start to think about my husband, he starts saying, I think I might be a little autistic myself, because I like to put my beer bottles with the cap on and I have to put them all back in the box and I can't throw one away. I thought, as we start to think about the way we think about things, it really makes you wonder how different we are really when we talk about neurodiversity, how different we really are in our thinking.
We're all very unique in our own special way.
Absolutely.
You mentioned your husband. Do you think, or do you know, if autism is it genetic? Can it be passed on from family members?
The research says that they believe that it's genetic.
Okay.
And talking with family members on both sides of the family, we believe that there are some indications of some undiagnosed cases in our family where when you think about it, you're like, that person maybe it's a little bit, or maybe a lot.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times people will see the disorder differently. So for instance, they don't see autism, but they may see seizures. Right? You may have a family member who has a tendency to have seizures. Well, that's a neurological disorder as well, right? But it could be an onset or a party to ASD. We talk about the gastrointestinal pieces. Like, there's so many pieces that can be connected. But we have children on both sides of our family who have been diagnosed. But our family doesn't talk about it. We're the squeaky wheel. We tell everybody. We want everybody to know, because here's the deal. When our child communicates with our family, we want her to feel safe in dealing with her family.
Do you have to kind of get your family ready to deal with her? Like, this is behavior you might see. This is what it is.
Front load.
Don't be tripping. You know, this is what it is.
This is it. We talk about it so regularly so that the family is like, oh, she told me that she did that, right?
Yeah.
Or, oh, she does that. But at the same time, when we're with family, we like to show them her uniqueness as well. So like the event you were at, we want to talk about, she can speak different languages. Yeah. She can count, yes. Right? She can read fluently, right? And so those are things that it's like, oh, because it changes the mindset, right? Of what children with autism, quote unquote, look like or act like, right? It's like, oh, she's so loving. I thought that children with autism didn't like to be touched.
Or sit in the corner, they won't say anything.
They won't say anything, yeah. But there are times in the day that she doesn't want to be touched. She don't want you to hold her. She don't want you to sit on your lap. You know, there are times where she has those tendencies. It may not be all the time, but again, every opportunity we have to expose our family to her, and we don't leave her at home. You know, a lot of families will just say, okay, well, I'll go, you don't. I'm not going to go. You go, I'll stay home. No, we all going. But we have to also be aware of when it's time to go.
Yeah.
It's time to go. When the child has had too much, overstimulated, this is when parents have to say, you know what? Thank you for inviting us. We're going to leave. But most times when we have those situations where you're embarrassed, is that means you've stayed beyond that moment. Right? Where you're not ready to go. And that's a lot with, not with all children, but especially with children on the spectrum. You have to be flexible at every turn. At every turn. We've gone into a restaurant. She's had a meltdown. You know what I'm saying? Not tonight. Okay. We're going on home. We're going to go to Burger King. You know, we're going to Chick-fil-A.
But taking her to stuff, exposing her helps her. She
just had her first cruise. She's just had her first amusement park experience just over the Christmas holiday. And so just understanding, but one of the things that I also see about our community is that we're not willing to share resources. We don't share resources well. When we hear about something, we kind of hoard that. We keep it to ourselves. So our foundation that we've created for her is called Chasing Grace, right? It's about educating our community on those very things, growth and development, right? Reliable resources, right? In advocating for acceptance, awareness, right? And at the same time, looking for community involvement. Where does the community embrace autism, right? And how do we become a part of that? And then the last thing, of course, right, is education for all. Not just the parents, not just the child, but for the siblings, for the aunties, the uncles, the godmothers. Everybody has to be educated on autism because it is going to take, and we truly believe it takes a village.
What impact has autism had on her siblings?
Oh my goodness.
Do you have other siblings in the house?
I have, everybody's older, right? Yes,
okay.
Everybody's older. Like she's the change of life baby. So
okay.
All the siblings are at least 11 and older. And so all of them have a different relationship with her. With the 19-year-old, they sing songs. They love to sing. She loves to sing, so she sings with her sister. They sing Bruno. They sing, you know, the Casa Marigal. And right. So they're always engaged. Her 11-year-old sister, they're learning how to share, teaching her how to wait, take a turn, my turn, your turn. Even my son, he was really interesting. He stopped just watching her. He would just watch her like, I don't know what to say. To now, he's so in tune with what she thinks. He says, what are you thinking? And, you know, because she likes to talk, he's like, okay, what can we do differently? And so they're negotiating between the two of them. So everybody has a different approach when dealing with her. Definitely.
I noticed that you listed in your book resources. Mm-hmm. What are some of your favorite resources for families that have autism in their family? Like, what places would you recommend?
Okay. Well, first and foremost, I'm an advocate for Babies Can't Wait. If you have a child between birth and 3 years old, I would definitely set up an appointment with Babies Can't Wait. An amazing experience. Also, again, the internet is overflowing with resources. Most recently, I used TSA Cares, which was an amazing resource for parents who are apprehensive about traveling with their children on the spectrum. Right? You think about crowds, you think about noise, you think about all those sensory overload opportunities in a travel situation. And we actually, over the Christmas break, used TSA Cares. TSA Cares assigned us an agent. The agent called me 2 days before our flight to check in, to see if there was anything that my daughter would need. While we were going through the process, she met us at the curb, escorted us all the way through checkpoint, right? 20 minutes. At one of the highest, busiest times at Hartsfield.
Has she flown before that?
She's flown as an infant. This is her first flight, right? And so an amazing experience, right? But just to think that if she had to stand in that line for an hour, hour and a half, because a lot of parents don't know about it, then the child has become agitated and overloaded. And at that point, it becomes a horrifying situation. I just responded to a mom on Black Autism Moms on Facebook, and the mom had a horrible experience with her child through TSA. And I'm thinking, if she had have just known about TSA Cares, she could have had a different experience. Her daughter could have had a different experience. Now this child may have an aversion to this type of experience again. My daughter had a ball. She straight through, no problems. We actually just went to also looking into amusement parks, right?
Okay.
We just had a great time at SeaWorld, right? Registered her right at customer service. At the guest services, registered her as a child on the spectrum. She got a fast pass for everybody that was in the group. Everybody that's with her gets the fast pass. Her stroller got a handicap tag, which means we didn't have to park it at the gate. We could roll it right into the aquarium. It was an amazing experience all the way around. But those resources are there. That's why our foundation, I feel, is so important, because we have to push that out to our community. You know what? I'm going to tell you this, one little thing. When my daughter was first diagnosed, my girlfriend said to me, now that you have her diagnosis, you need to get a Becky. I said, a what?
What is that?
Right, what I said, what's a Becky? She said, you need to get a Becky. A mom, a Caucasian mom is basically what she was telling me, who is just completely immersed with resources and all these things that they could, possibly let you know about autism and what's available. And I was immediately offended.
Were there no black
Not
moms
offended
like
that I couldn't rely on Becky, for the lack of a better word, but that there were no Keishas and Tamikas and Tanyas that were willing to talk about this thing and get resources into our own community, that I had to go outside of my community to actually get what I needed for my daughter.
Are they there?
They are. We just got to be diligent about it, and we've got to know that if they're good for everybody. But we've got to be about it. So the research is necessary. There's probably not a week that goes by that I'm not reading an article about autism.
I understand that's important. How do you find time for you?
My sitter.
Okay.
My sitter. But that wasn't like that in the beginning. There were sleepless nights, a lot of them, right? Because sleeping, insomnia, is one of the other issues that come along with ASD. Children don't sleep well. So our daughter actually takes melatonin in the evenings to settle her mind, just so that she can rest. But because she's such an empath and she takes in all of this information visually and auditory, she would wake up and be like, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, X. Like, just wake up out of her sleep. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, blast off. It was like she was just replaying whatever she had seen or heard throughout the day. It was like her mind never shut off. So we had to actually give her the melatonin at night, just so that her mind could kind of power down a little bit, right? And her to get to that REM sleep where she could rest. Because we already know that when you're not rested, yes. So we call it the vitamin. Come on, take your vitamin. And she takes it willingly. So we tell it's a vitamin and she takes it. It's very, very easy. It's all natural, right? But again, Zarbee's, right? Love it. But we live by it. But those are certain things we just don't leave home without. So even if I'm coming to your house to hang out, the Zarbee's is in my purse, because it might be past the time that she normally goes to sleep. So we're not going to break that routine. Pop. There goes a vitamin. And then she's able to maintain a little longer. But again, that front loading And that preparation is really key with children on the spectrum.
What is the name of your charity again?
Chasing Grace. The Chasing Grace Foundation. Yes.
How can they find it? How can anybody find that?
We have a Facebook group on Facebook, and it's called Chasing Grace, and it's raising an African-American child on the autism spectrum. And so you can get the information for the foundation through there.
Okay. Where can any and everybody find the book?
The book is on Amazon, and it's the first in the series. And the second book, again, is due to come out around Valentine's Day. And it's actually The Little Professor and Rainbow Meet Miss Mira, which is her therapist through the Babies Can't Wait program. So we talk about her experience in that program and what it looks like.
And so they will basically just keep coming as you chart her progress and growth.
Yep. The next one after this one is The Little Professor and Rainbow Go to School.
Nice.
So one thing I wanted to point out about the cover of our book, it's hand-drawn, right? And it's very special. And so some have asked, why did you not choose more of a graphic, designer to design your book? Well, this book is actually illustrated in its entirety by a former student of mine who is also on the autism spectrum. So this is his gift, if you look. And now, here's this. Every drawing is done by just a normal pack of Crayola color pencils.
Every drawing in here?
Every drawing in that book is drawn by an 8x8 piece of paper and Crayola color pencils.
Okay.
So I leave the images in their rawest form. However he designs them, I leave it because it speaks to the ability of children on the spectrum. Don't discount your babies.
Is he your illustrator for the next book?
He is my illustrator until he doesn't want to illustrate anymore. So, yes, he is also the illustrator. Charles Clay. Yes. Clayton County Public School student. Awesome. Yes. So that is him. And then again, each one is teaching one. So.
Indeed.
All right.
Indeed.
But these books are available on Amazon.
On Amazon.
Yes.
Be sure to grab yourself one or two. Or just keep up with the series and buy them as they come out. Mm-hmm. Well, Keisha, I want to thank you so much for coming to have lunch with me and
thank you.
Talk about autism and
my plate.
Thank you for assisting with lunch and cooking everything.
Thank you for having
Hopefully
me.
this information is very helpful for whoever watches this.
Yes.
So I do appreciate it, and thank you, little professor.
Yes.
For being who you are. And as always, we would love to say that we love to share good food, good conversation with some very good people. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you guys next time.